We dedicate this episode of Did You Hear to accessible formats, large print books, audiobooks, and more. In this episode, Elena McVicar and Dave Carson chat juvenile fiction awesomeness. But first, Ashley Fick and Michelle Ranney sit down with Dave to talk about food insecurity as our discussion topic for Gather at the Table.
Welcome to another edition of the Did You Hear podcast. Today we're going to talk about Gather at the Table. It's a conversation that allows people to better understand different viewpoints and build a stronger community. Gather with us to break bread and discuss food insecurity in Johnson County. We provide the conversation starters and the bread, and you provide the conversation. All are welcome to this drop-in discussion. Food and drink are provided. And to discuss this topic, I have two librarians with me today. I will have them introduce themselves. To my left is...
Michelle Ranney. I'm a youth services librarian at the Shawnee and Cedar Row libraries.
Welcome.
I'm Ashley Fick. I'm one of the civic engagement librarians for the system.
What is the role of food in the Gather at the Table events that we host?
So we see food as a great equalizer. Breaking bread is symbolic in cultures all across the world.
Sure.
And, just having something there to share a plate or a meal with somebody, it brings a welcoming atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Eases tensions.
So Gather at the Table is an event that we have throughout the year, correct?
Yes. We do multiple a year. Hopefully starting in the fall, we'll do one a month. To bring people to talk about difficult topics. Yeah.
What kind of topics have you had in the past?
We've done fake news. We've done school shootings. We've done race.
Race, yeah.
Wow, so really important topics, and this is no less important. We're talking about food insecurity, correct?
So I think a lot of people... one, either don't know what food insecurity is or do have a little bit of an understanding of it, but think we live in Johnson County and we don't really deal with that. We're a very wealthy county. But in reality, there are children and adults as well that struggle with not knowing where their next meal is going to come from, not knowing if they're going to have breakfast before they go to school or go to work. And I said earlier, that we joke about being hangry, but that's a joke because it's a real emotion that comes from not having enough food to be able to function on a day-to-day basis.
In Johnson County, about 9.1% of the population qualifies as food insecure, and homes with children under the age of 18 make up 33% of the food insecure homes in Johnson County. So it's something that really does exist here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So are these discussions for everyone, all age groups?
They're for everyone. We have had young children come and sit. Now, they don't necessarily participate at the same level as an adult or a teenager, but we get a lot of teens and we get a lot of adults of all ages, and everybody sits together and they chat and they're on an equal footing. I think it's really special because it's one of the unique places where especially teens and adults can sit together and hear from each other, and they are on an equal footing.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I know I was, one of the other topics that we talked about was the Me Too movement. And that was really interesting to have teens at the table and have adults at the table and listening to these teens. And we're talking about 13, 14-year-old students that actually not only have opinions, but life experience with some of these issues.
Sure.
And it's really encouraging to see them want to discuss those kind of things, not only with their peers, but with adults as well.
How has the attendance been to these events?
We typically get around 80 to 90 people.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, that's a big table. Oh, sorry, that's a horrible joke. So several tables, obviously.
Yeah, several tables. Usually we try to, it's a drop-in program too. So if somebody can only, they're walking through and they see it and they can only stay for 10 minutes, they are welcome to sit down for 10 minutes and engage in the conversation and get up. Or they can sit and stay for the entire program.
Now, it's not just a free-form conversation, though, right? You have moderators. Tell us a little bit about what they do and why we have them there.
So the moderators are all library staff who've been trained in facilitation. They help keep the conversation moving. They help keep it on topic. They help prevent us from going down rabbit holes deeper and deeper and deeper. They make sure that everybody at the table is civil, although usually that's not a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not there to stop communication. They're there to facilitate it.
Yeah, they're there to keep it moving.
So you have the starter questions, right? Can you give us a sample of what some of those conversation starters are?
Yeah. So the first question, we're just going to open up with, what is food insecurity? We do suspect that there's some people that maybe don't know, or maybe they have an idea, but they don't know the full picture. So that question is meant to help fill in some gaps for them. We also ask, who do you think is most at risk for food insecurity? Where do you think food insecurity is most prevalent in the metro and then within Johnson County?
And then we kind of take a little bit of a turn to maybe some more heated questions about food insecurity, talking about food waste, what is okay to do. We had an issue even in the metro recently with the places having their food taken away because they weren't licensed correctly. And so talking about those kind of issues as well.
That's interesting. So it kind of leaves like a food desert, just an area where it just makes, if you don't have transportation to get to a place that sells food, or worse, there are places that sell food, but it's not the kind of food that that's nutritious food, it's all pre-processed, packaged. Yeah. I could see how that'd be really difficult situation. Why is this important? Why is the library hosting these conversations?
So, American society is getting more and more polarized. It's very common for people not to interact with people of different beliefs, different viewpoints, different political orientations. And so we believe this is an opportunity for people to get together in a neutral, safe space and interact with people they wouldn't otherwise interact with, and hear points of view that they otherwise, maybe if it was on Facebook, they would just mute.
And in this case, you may not have polar opposite opinions. You may just not know of the problem. I mean, I suppose there are people coming from all different positions on this.
Yeah, that's true. At any of our gather at the tables, there are people that just didn't know, too.
Right.
It's the only one that we have on Thursday, April 18th from 5 to 6:30 at the Central Resource Library?
Yes.
That's the only
Currently.
one. Okay, so you do not want to miss this event. It's your chance to gather at the table.
So what exactly does accessible format mean? Well, it includes large print, recorded audio, and electronic formats. Basically, it's all about access. Do you or someone you know have trouble seeing? Do you need larger print? Do you need an alternative to print altogether? Well, Johnson County Library makes sure that you have access to the content that you want.
Welcome back to the Did You Hear podcast. We are ready for the We Recommend segment. And right now, we're going to talk to one of our collections folks. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Elena McVicar. Like you said, I am working collections. I select kids' materials in all formats, so ebooks, CD audio, physical books, from babies through 18-year-olds. So
awesome. How long have you been doing that for the Johnson County Library?
A little over a year. I'm still a newbie.
And before that, you did the same thing for a different library?
No, before that, I was here. I was at Leawood. I was
okay.
a YS person, and then before that, I worked for a different library in the Metro. Was also a youth services person. So I've always been on the programming side with just a very avid interest in collections, and this position opened up at the right time, and I was able to slide in there.
Wonderful. So what do you like most about your job?
I love my job. I love my job a lot. I like that there's an aspect of puzzling that goes along with it, because I need to figure out, this book is popular. how many are we buying? How big of a demand do I think is going to come from the patrons? And how can I fill that demand and still have budget left over for the rest of the year? So there's some math involved, which I like math, but it's just like the right amount of math. And a lot of, I get to see all the new books before they really hit shelves. So
How do you stay on top of everything that's new that's coming out?
oh gosh. Luckily I was doing a lot of that naturally before I got this job. So I'm a huge Twitter person.
Okay.
So following a lot of people on Twitter who are, in the publishing industry or are kind of movers and shakers within the industry. EW magazine likes to do a lot of what they think is going to be new and popular.
EW, what does that stand for?
Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so it seems kind of weird to look at magazines such as that, but they really can sometimes predict and shape trends that are happening.
Sure, it's
and
what's popular.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough that Johnson County is sending me to Book Expo America in New York. And so that's a huge conference filled with publishers and authors. And so I'm really excited to go there and sort of get a feel for what trends are going to be happening within the next year.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so speaking of trends and what's good right now, we're talking about J-fiction today, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your top suggestion?
My top suggestion for J-fiction is really hard because it encompasses so many different genres. Within J-fiction, you have kids who are just starting to read. You have kids who are entering middle school and can read just about anything you put in front of them. So J-fiction encompasses so much and so many different reading levels. But I do have a few tried and trues that I always recommend. First of all, I'm a sucker for graphic novels, and I love our J graphic novel section. One that is really popular right now that I was actually surprised about are these books called science comics. And they're nonfiction graphic novels that have just taken off. I've had to reorder them and need to keep bringing them in. And I went back and made sure we had all the old ones because the demand for that really outpaced what I was expecting.
Really? So I don't know that I necessarily understand.
Yeah,
So,
they're these books, and they're like one of the latest ones is about the brain.
oh,
And so it's a nonfiction book explaining about the brain and all the processes.
how stuff works.
And,
Yeah.
but it's done in graphic novel form.
Oh, fascinating.
And so I'm always advocating for graphic novels. When I was working the desk at Leawood, even, we had a lot of parents who were like, well, we want them to read a real book. And I was like, this is a real book. They're having to interpret pictures. They're having to use a different part of their brains to really get into this material. And so they're just as important for your brain and your mind as quote unquote regular books are with no pictures.
What are some of the other topics in that series?
There's one about sharks. I think there's one about trees. Those are the three that come to my mind now, but they really span. I think there's one about cars. They span a really wide variety.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so am I crazy thinking that even adults could pick up something like this and be interested in it?
Yeah, no, I 100% pick up kids' graphic novels sometimes, especially nonfiction ones. I'm like, oh, this explains it in a way that makes sense to me because I'm a visual person.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, me too. And so if I'm going to walk out on the library floor, where would I find this?
It's in our graphic novel section, which is usually either at the beginning of or end of our J-fiction sections, and it would be in the nonfiction area.
Are they available at every library or just, I
They
suppose...
Yes, they should be available at every library.
But this is a good time to remind everyone that you can search our catalog at jocolibrary.org and search till your heart's content. So are there graphic novels that are made for adults specifically?
Yeah,
Kind of same thing?
Yes, actually, I just put in because I also, in addition to ordering for all the youth, I order adult graphic novels randomly too, and I just put in an order for a new series of adult graphic novels that are called Maker Comics. And so I think one is about how to make clothes and one is about how to fix your car, but it's done again in graphic format. So if you're a visual person, I think that really helps. And there's a
That's
little bit of humor
fascinating.
you can get with, pictures that you really can't get with just text sometimes. So I'm really excited for those to come in and see them.
Well, and a quick plug for the Central Resource Library. We've got a wonderful makerspace at the front of our building, and if you haven't seen it, it's just an amazing space that has all kinds of things for makers. And now we have books.
Well, yeah. So every
help you
time,
along.
when I'm
Okay.
ordering, I keep them in mind. So if there's books that are coming out for children in the nonfiction area that are for makers, I try to grab those. I know Matt, who orders our adult nonfiction, selects with them in mind. So really, we're selecting with our whole system and trying to be mindful of what programming are going on and what might be new and popular. So it's an ever-shifting
Yeah,
landscape.
I think it's a great example of how you're staying on top of what's current and keeping your thumb on the pulse of what's interesting and useful, particularly.
We try as much as we can. I know there are definitely things we miss, but we're really thankful for we have a lot of patrons and staff that will fill out our suggestion for purchase online, and we do go through every single one and reply. So if you
Nice.
put in a request for purchase, please make sure to include your email, because we will reply to you and let you know what decision we made on that.
That's a great tip. So let's keep exploring juvenile fiction. And what else would you suggest for our listeners?
Well, right now, another thing I try to suggest, especially, I'm trying to think, when I was on the desk, one of the biggest questions I got was for reluctant readers. And I would always point towards things that are series, because it's easy to get them started and then kind of let them go on those. So Dave Pilkey's always popular. He will be popular for a very long time, and he does a couple different series. And a lot of those have pictures in them too, not quite as much as a graphic format, but enough to sort of give your eyes a break every now and then. Of course, Harry Potter will always be popular as well.
Sure.
We've been adding to that a little bit with the new movies that have come out. She has published a screenplay book format for every single movie that's come out, so there should be another one in a couple years, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
There's one coming, I would say the book coming out in the future that has been getting a ton of buzz is called, I wrote it down because I always forget, Ronan Boyle and the Bridge of Riddles by Thomas Lennon. It has a huge printing run, and the demand on it is really high. So that's already in our catalog. It's coming out, I think, in a month or so.
Really?
But so we can kind of tell based on print run and how many has been ordered by other systems, kind of what the demand on that might be. But it's
Sure.
impossible to ever predict, especially for children, like what's really going to grab them. Because the industry is, adults are the gatekeepers. Adults write the books, adults review the books, adults publish
Sure.
the books, adults decide how many of them will be published. And so there's a certain amount you can kind of guess about how much it's going to be marketed to kids, but you can never guess really what's going to grab their attention and what's really going to take off. So even once all the books are published and in the system, I need to be mindful and keep an eye on what's going. So I try to work the desk every now and then so I can actually talk to kids and hear what they're reading, and I always get a lot out of that.
So you get a lot of feedback from kids, and you get firsthand.
I try to, especially in the summer when the branches get really busy, I always try to work a couple desk shifts here and there. So I can, and I just have my order sheet pulled up, and I remember last summer a kid came up and asked for a book, and I looked it up and I was like, I did not realize we'd gotten so low on that. And so it's really good for me, I really value that chance to talk to kids face to face and one-on-one and really hear what they want to read and what their interests are.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. So the book that you mentioned, you said that was Thomas Lennon. I wonder if that's the actor.
I think it might be
my
based on
gosh.
the print run.
Okay, now I want to read it.
Based on the publicity, I do feel that's who that person is.
Okay, so for our listeners that might not know who Thomas Lennon is, he started on a comedy troupe on MTV back in the day called The State. He parlayed that into Reno 911 as Lieutenant Dangle, and he is a regular, or was a regular on one of my favorite podcasts, Comedy Bang Bang, and he does voices for so many different cartoons and things like that. It makes total sense that he would write a kid's book,
Especially
he's
because,
hilarious.
it's pretty much a debut. Like there's not really anything else credited to him, so I think that must attest to the print run and popularity of the book. But,
Well, neat. What else do you have for us?
so one of my old favorites that I always like to recommend is a book called Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper.
Okay.
It's about a girl who has, I want to say cerebral palsy, but it's some sort of disability where she's pretty much locked in her own brain and she's unable to really communicate. And so this book was published a while ago. So it was really before a lot of technological advances were made sort of within that. But through the course of the book, she does get a device that allows her to communicate. So everybody always thought she was not smart or had no ability whatsoever. And so when she got this device, they realized that no, she's really intelligent. She's just been locked in her own brain. And I think it does a really great job of exploring, it's from her point of view, so it explores her feelings really well. And like also her, her parents feel incredibly guilty for not realizing how smart and how just, locked in herself she was. So I think it does a really good job of exploring her disability from many, many angles. And it's definitely one I read that stayed with me for many years. So that's an old favorite I always like to recommend.
That sounds like a great recommendation. What's that title and author again?
It's called Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper.
Okay.
We also are getting ready for the new William Allen White list.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that comes out, and I've already ordered the books. I don't think I can say what the full list is yet, but we really try to help promote that list in all of our branches, because I know a lot of our schools really want their kids to read as many books on that title as possible, or on that list as possible. And so if you are interested in those books or that list or want more information, feel free to drop in our branches. They just revamped their website, so it might be a little difficult to imagine, and voting is going on for the books that we had last year.
Okay.
And I am intrigued to see which one wins. I always have a guess, but I never know for sure. And we do, if you are interested in books that have won awards, so we label books that have won the Prince Award, the Newbery Award, the Caldecott Medal, and the William Allen White Award every year with a yellow sticker. And so if you ever are working on a book project or want your child to read one of the award winners, it's really easy to scan our shelves and just look for a yellow sticker.
Sure. Oh, that's great. And I'll go ahead and plug our website, jocolibrary.org. If you go to the We Recommend section, one of the ways that we have the catalog broken down is bestsellers and award winners. There's several different ways that you can explore the catalog. But if you want to look at just the award winners, they're all listed there, and it's a great way to just go ahead and find these wonderful books and then put them on hold and have them delivered directly to your location.
And also, if you're someone who really is interested in getting new books right away or being sort of on the forefront of that, I do publish lists of everything, not everything, but the top titles that I've ordered through our BiblioCommons website. And it's my username is Elena JCL. I think you can find me through that.
Right. So if you go into the catalog and you do a search, you can search for other folks that have reviewed items, and of course, it's anonymous. It's just people putting up different lists and things like that. And so yours is there. It's Elena JCL. Yeah, ELENA.
So it's basically the top 100 books I've ordered based on how many I've ordered. So sometimes they don't make it if I don't order enough copies, but unfortunately I just can't order tons of copies of everything. But so those are usually, and I order about 2 to 3 months in advance. Wow. So if you're really kind of wanting to see what's coming out in the future, like a full comprehensive list, I publish one for teen, juvenile, picture book, and adult graphic.
Neat. So are you just buying books all the time, or is there a time of year that there tends to be more purchasing than others, or how does that work?
We definitely buy throughout the year, but there are 2 seasons where we buy more than others, and there's 2 seasons in publishing, spring and fall. Spring is not quite as robust as fall, So spring publishing season is happening pretty much now through May. And so I've ordered through May. So most of those big titles are already in there, like the one I mentioned earlier, the Ronan Boyle, Miss Applegate. I can never remember her first name. Catherine Applegate. She wrote, she has one called The Endling, and that's another giant one with a big demand that we have coming out.
The Endling, what's that one about?
It's a series about, she writes about animal books
Okay.
about animals, and so this is her second book in the series, and it's animal adventure books.
Oh, wow.
And so if you're interested in sort of, animal adventure, she has a really large backlog of books that are, they're all a little sad, but they're all really hopeful and really well written.
Okay. Wow.
James Patterson has a couple coming out this spring, so there's always a James Patterson around the corner.
So what are some of his titles?
Okay, so James Patterson, he has a couple series out. There's one called Not So Normal Norbert, and his new one is called All American Treasure. Let me double check that. All American Adventures, and it deals with a family who are treasure hunters.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, James Patterson, I know he gets a lot of flack just because of how much he puts out, but he and his people do always manage to find what, they really have their finger on the heart of trends that kids will really want to read.
Okay.
So that's why I think that's part of the reason why his books are so popular, especially for kids, because he writes things they want to read about or they find interesting.
That's great. What other authors would you say just are really keyed into what kids want to read? Would you say? I mean, maybe that's true of all authors. I don't know.
I do think there are all authors connect with kids in one way or the other, but there are definitely some who have maybe a broader appeal. Ricky Riordan is one of those. He really managed to find what kids are interested in and what keeps their attention and what they like to read. Mike Lupica, he writes sports books, and he's kind of a tried and true that's been around for a really long time. And we have parents coming in now that are like, we remember reading him when we were young, and he's still churning out really great books that also intrigue their children. And so he's been able to sort of bridge a generational gap, I think, in a way that other people haven't. And then we also have books that are such classics that then they get reimagined. So The Babysitter's Club is one of those. It was popular when I was little. And Raina Telgemeier, who's a graphic comic artist and writer, she has reimagined it in comic form. And now it's finding a resurgence of popularity. And now I think Netflix has picked up that show, or they're redoing it, I think, the first 6 books.
Oh, wow.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, so it's really neat to start to see what books find a new audience sort of years down the road.
Well, so when we first scheduled this segment, we were talking about getting people ready for Comic-Con. So I'm going to throw this question out to you. What would you suggest as far as kind of reading materials that would help our audience, the juvenile fiction audience, to get them prepared for Comic-Con?
For juvenile fiction, I would say, so if you're really wanting to get sort of a basic knowledge of comics, or sort of maybe find an entry point into comics that if you haven't explored that genre previously, I would say there's a couple of tried and trues that are really gateways into that genre. One is, as I mentioned, Raina Telgemeier. She is like the queen of J-graphic novels. Okay. She has written a book called Smile, and it's about her experiences as a kid. She knocks out her front teeth and has to go just through an obscene amount of orthodontia and time, and gets teased. And so she, I think that's maybe one of the most popular graphic comics that are out there. Another one is the Amulet series, and I wrote this author's name down because it's Kazuo Kibushi. Okay. And that one has been going on for a while, and that's another really great entry point into graphic novels for J readers. There's one called Phoebe and the Unicorn by Dana Simpson that's just really cute and fun. I really love J graphics, so I could I could talk about this one for a while. They're really fun. There's one called Lumberjanes by Noelle Stevenson, and that's maybe for a little older J audience.
Okay.
But
So I think that might be a good point to bring up. What is the age range for Jay?
this is, again, I think I alluded to this earlier, but J is rough because it really encompasses kids who are independently reading, independent readers through pretty much 6th grade.
Wow.
So there's a huge range of possibilities within that. And so we, as a collection team, and we have this written out in our policies as well, that we don't act in loco parentis for kids. We really want parents to help kids make decisions on what they read. So if you as parents are kind of unsure about graphic novels, please ask your librarian, because they can give you, like I would tell parents, because they would ask me, is this appropriate? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you if it's appropriate because I don't know, your background. It might be appropriate for your kid, but there could be another kid the exact same age that comes in tomorrow that it's not appropriate for.
Sure.
So I would always just try to give, this is what it's about. This are how old the characters are. And then, these are things that have come up in the past with maybe other parents that have been worried about. But ultimately, I always suggest that maybe they either read it together or the parent reads it first if they're really concerned.
Yeah.
Because I understand as a parent, that's really, it's tricky.
It is. It's really challenging to be a parent because, you're trying to help
reasons.
your kids. and you want your child to stretch themselves.
Right.
You want them to grow.
Right.
And just because there are new words that they haven't encountered before,
right.
you want them to develop their reading skills.
Mm-hmm.
But you also don't want them to fail.
Right.
Because that can really derail a good reader.
Right. And reading is so tricky. I look back and I see kids learning to read now. I'm like, how does anybody really learn to read? And so we straddle a really fine line with that as well, because, I have kids that come in and their parents are like, they're only reading this one book. How do I get them off this one book? And so it's so tricky, because anything at that age, I feel there's a lot of instances that could just turn kids off of reading, or like you said, discourage them. And so all the librarians are really cognizant of that and really try their best to give good information and to help parents sort of navigate that. And so the kid who was only reading, I think he was only reading fantasy, and the mom really, really wanted him to read a realistic book. And I could just, his entire body posture was just so down. And so I was like, well, I'm going to give you a realistic fiction book, but we're also going to send you home with a fantasy and so it's hard to navigate that a lot of times. It's really tricky, but I think our librarians do that very well.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the role of the graphic novel then.
Right.
Because I'm sure that helps a lot of kids, even if maybe the words are a little bit above them. They have pictures to help them along.
Contextual clues,
Right,
and
right.
so I always recommend graphic novels, because a lot of the, it's visual. Like I'm a very visual person. Like half the time if you ask me about a book, I'm like, oh crap, I can see the cover in my head perfectly, but I couldn't tell you the title right off the top of my head. And so I think with kids too, there's some that just react better to visual learning styles.
Sure.
And so with the reluctant readers, I always try to get them into that a little bit. And once they're hooked, because there's definitely series that spin off from graphics. There's graphics that have spun out of, chapter books. So there's all kinds of gateways you can explore.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand as a parent, you're navigating school drops-offs and pickups and family stuff and stuff and outings and sports. So I just really want to say, never be afraid to ask your librarian for help, because we love our jobs. That's what we do. We want to connect kids to books, and we want to help you connect your kid to the best book for them. And so we're very familiar with helping parents navigate sort of tricky, is this appropriate for my kid? Is it going to discourage my kid? Is my kid ready for this?
Right.
And so we try to help as best as we can.
Well, to wrap things up, I know you brought in a list, and I want to make sure that anything that you have on your list that we have time to mention, and if it prepares people for Comic-Con, all the better. So what do you have for us?
So there's one called All's Fair in Middle School. It's by Victoria Jameson, and it is about a girl who her parents make their living going around Renaissance festivals. And she's been homeschooled all her life, and she decides she wants to go to middle school, like a regular middle school. And so it's about her entry into that and dealing with, her quote unquote weird family. And so I think this one really hits home for a lot of people who go to Comic-Con, because I think nerd culture is a little more accepted now than it used to be. But I think sometimes it's, navigating your family that might like to dress up and do weird things.
Sure.
And handling your peers and sort of expectations with that. And Victoria Jameson also wrote a graphic novel called Roller Girl.
Okay.
And it's about a girl who wants to try roller derby. And so her books are really great about sort of addressing the awkwardness of growing up in social circles and doing what you love sort of in the face of some teasing.
Okay. Wow.
That one's really fun.
What else you have on the list?
There's one called Nimona, and this is, again, probably for a little older middle school and up graphic novel readers, but it's about a girl who's a monster. And so it's sort of, instead of a fairy tale, it's like an introverted fairy tale where it follows the monster and like what makes you a monster and what makes you a bad guy versus a good guy. And so she kind of takes that trope and flips it on its head. And
Neat.
Noelle Stevenson, she's really, really great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is that the list?
That's the list. The rest I have are for adults, so I don't know if you want to go into those or
we'll
not.
save that for another time.
Okay.
But all of those titles can be found through our website, jocolibrary.org.
For more episodes of Did You Hear, go to the Johnson County Library website, jocolibrary.org/didyouhear.